We have 800,000 children missing. Most of them are victims of human trafficking.
My guest today is John DeGarmo, a leading international foster care expert, author, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Foster Care Institute. With a Ph.D. in educational leadership, he's dedicated his life to improving the lives of vulnerable children in the foster care system.
I never planned on being a foster or adoptive parent. It was nothing I never even anticipated, if you will.
I want to ask you about having 60 children go through your household. What challenges did you face?
Well, no child wants to be in the foster care system. Nobody. And these are children who are victims of abuse, victims of neglect, victims of abandonment, and by far, the vast majority have issues of trust, issues of attachment, as well as they should. And when they come to my home, I'm a stranger. They're afraid, they're confused, they're scared, they're frightened, they don't know what's going to happen next. And so it takes them a while to learn that we're not going to hurt them. It takes them a while to learn to trust us. And that can be tough, it can be challenging.
Now, compassion fatigue is a real concern for foster parents and caregivers. You've gone through 60 kids.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you wake up the next morning and accept another child, because a lot of foster kid parents don't.
There have been times where I have been completely worn down, completely exhausted, burned out, if you will, suffering from compassion fatigue. But there's ways to combat it, if you will. Self-care is critical. If you can't care for yourself, you can't care for those in crisis, those who need you most. So it's important that I practice self-care. Whatever reason it might be, I am just driven. I feel that this is my calling to help. But if I don't help these children, then who will?
Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm your host, Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various global issues and how we can help. My guest today is John DeGarmo, a leading international foster care expert, author, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Foster Care Institute. With a Ph.D. in educational leadership, he's dedicated his life to improving the lives of vulnerable children in the foster care system. Dr. DeGarmo and his wife have opened their home to over 60 foster children, providing them with love, stability, and hope. He's authored several books on foster care, including The Little Book of Foster Care, Wisdom and Faith in Foster Care. Dr. DeGarmo is also the founder of Never Too Late, a residential group home for boys in foster care. His work has been recognized with numerous awards, including the Good Morning America Ultimate Hero Award. Perhaps aside from his work with children, the most fascinating thing and parts of Dr. DeGarmo's life that I want to delve into combine a diverse background, which includes a touring performer with Up With People, a DJ across 2 continents, and a professional wrestling industry worker, all of which must have enriched his empathetic approach to foster care. So, hello, John, and welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
I'm going to start with your journey into foster care, which began with personal tragedy. Can you share how the loss of your first child led you to become a foster parent? And I know we're starting in a difficult place for you, but I read your story and I kind of understood where all of this started. And when I dig deep into people, I find people who are really making change and really making a difference in the world are people who experience and appreciate and understand what they're pushing for.
Sure. Thanks for asking. Yes, the death of our first child really set us in the path of becoming foster parents. I never planned on being a foster or adoptive parent. It was nothing I never even anticipated, if you will. But after the death of our first child, who died of a condition called anencephaly, or some pronounce it anencephaly, it's a condition where the brain or skull doesn't truly form. And my wife was in labor for 92 hours at that time. And as I write in several of my books, I turned my back on a lot of things at that point in my life. It wasn't until years later that we moved back to the United States. Well, my wife is from Australia. We were living there at that time. And I started teaching in a rural school system and at a high school level. And I had a lot of kids coming through my classroom with issues of behavior, issues of academics, issues of attendance. And I kept recognizing a pattern that I started in the home. And in addition, there was at that time, and this is in the late 1990s, the largest child sex trafficking ring in America happening at that time in this small county. And I had a lot of those victims in my classroom. So I went to my wife and said, we lost our first child. We're blessed with 3 healthy children, but we lost our first child. I had these children in my classroom who are victims of neglect, victims of abuse, victims of trafficking. How can we help these children? Can we bring them home? So that led to us becoming foster parents to over 60 plus children and adopting 3 from the system. And I'm very driven every single day because sometimes the system has failed some of my kids that have been in my home. Because when they come to my house, they become members of our family. There's no biological or foster adoptive. They're all members of our family, if you will. And so since the system has failed some of my kids in my home and the death of my first child, I'm very driven every single day to make sure that no more children are harmed.
I love that you said they're members of our family. I often emphasize this point that we've been traditionally led to believe that, your biological parents and your bloodline should be different, and the compassion levels that you provide for your siblings or your parents or your own children should be different. And I think that's part of the break we see in society and communities where, we care about our own house, so to speak, in that sense of the traditional house. And yet we don't expand that globally. And I think part of it is that the way we define what's important, right? The way we define this is my son or my daughter versus this is an adoptive child or, here's someone I'm helping. And so it blurs the lines of how much compassion you're allowed to present, so to speak, because something in the back of your mind archaically and historically has told you that this one child is more important because it is of your creation, so to speak. So I love that you don't make that distinction. Now,
Thank you.
I want to ask you about having 60 children go through your household. What have been some of the most profound lessons you've learned from these experiences? Because it's not all rosy, and there are very difficult moments.
Oh no,
yes. So
it is it's the most challenging thing I've done, to be sure. Yeah,
right. So to open up on that a little, what challenges did you face?
Well, no child wants to be in the foster care system. Nobody. And these are children who are victims of abuse, victims of neglect, victims of abandonment, and by far the vast majority have issues of trust, issues of attachment, as well as they should. And when they come to my home, I'm a stranger. So they're afraid, they're confused, they're scared, they're frightened. They don't know what's going to happen next. They don't know if anybody loves them. So they have issues of trust and attachment in our home. Many times they may have anger management issues, eating disorders or sleep anxieties. And so it takes them a while to learn that we're not going to hurt them. It takes them a while to learn to trust us. And that can be tough, it can be challenging. And then we have children, they have a lot of learning disabilities as well, and mental health issues. In fact, and as what I tell journalists basically on a daily basis right now, the real pandemic has never been a virus. It's mental health. We're in a mental health crisis, and our children are at the forefront of that crisis. So all these issues combined, when you're caring for this child in your home 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that might not trust you, that might have mental health issues, that might have anger management issues or whatever it might be, it can be challenging. But at the same time, it has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done. I've learned to love so much more than I can ever even imagine. And every child that's come through my home has made me a better person in some way.
And what were the most pressing issues that need immediate attention? Because you touch on mental health, and I've vocalized this. I've been a tremendous part of some of the activation of mental health programs because I think we really lack understanding how much need there is for that kind of support versus, especially with children, a broken leg. You know, to put a cast on a broken leg and send a kid home and come back in 3 weeks and you're good, go back and play is so much simpler than the slightest mental health issue. So do you think that's the most pressing issue that you've understood that needs immediate attention? And how do you propose that we can look into that or resolve it?
It is the most pressing issue. Today's children, particularly since the lockdowns of 2020, today's children, there's an increase in teenage suicide attempts. There's an increase in addictions and obesity and depression and anxiety. All these issues are at the forefront right now. And again, particularly since the lockdowns of 2020, where we locked these kids up in their home with, in America, there are 5 million children who experience domestic violence in their house every single day. And in 2020, there were many who believed we should lock the schools down and these kids should go home because they're safer at home. Well, they weren't. They were locked at home 24 hours a day with their abuser with no mandated reporter whatsoever. So the issue is worse, if you will. And many people don't know how to address it. Many people are not aware of it. They're not familiar with it. They don't know what it looks like. But these are our children. This is our future. And so it must be a prominent issue that all of society must address.
It is a serious issue. And you're right. You touched upon something that's important when you said the issue is many people don't know how to address it and don't know how to, provide solutions or any resolution for it. And so we're not making progress because the right people who understand and who know aren't at the forefront of the decision making, basically, for us, just like you mentioned about the schools and the lockdowns and everything else, which is unfortunate. Now, you've founded Never Too Late, a group home for boys aging out of foster care. First, for the audience, because a lot of people don't know how the system works, and that's part of the problem, the inaccessibility or the unawareness of people to this kind of information of what happens to a child when they reach a certain age, and they kind of come out of the foster care and how it works. So, if you can start with a brief understanding of the system and why these loopholes happen, which require places like Never Too Late. And then, basically that would be your inspiration, I guess, for starting, because you see these pockets of problems where you're like, okay, I need to come in here and try to fix this through creating these spaces. And second question is, what impact has this had on the boys who've gone through Never Too Late?
Well, it's a great question, but it's also a difficult question for me to answer due to the incredibly draconian and tyrannical regulations and policies put in place during the lockdowns. Many residential therapeutical group homes like Never Too Late had to close down during the lockdowns. And so unfortunately, it's not open at this time. Not to my wishes, but because there were so many of those regulations forced upon us, and not just Never Too Late, but so many homes that they were forced to close down by the government. And that's something that I still have a great deal of disappointment in, if you will. Nevertheless, youth, but we were doing great work. Thank you for asking. We were doing great work. Youth in foster care, when they age out of the system, whether it's 18 years of age in some states or 21 years of age in other states, the statistics are rather grim for them. 55% will drop out of school. 65% will end up homeless. 75% will end up incarcerated. And then for so many, the system starts over again. The cycle repeats itself for their children, the next generation. And for that child that teen, that youth in the foster care system, when they're about to age out of the system, they don't want to be in the foster care. Nobody wants to be in foster care. So they want to leave the system, the vast majority of them, as quickly as they can. But there's no support system in place for them. They don't have a family, if you will, unless their foster family has a relationship with them, which is what my wife and I try to do. We try to have a relationship with all of them when they leave the home, for whatever reason that might be. But they don't, for the vast majority of them, they don't have a support system in place. There's no one to help them learn how to apply for a job, how to driver's license. They don't have social skills. They don't have living skills. They don't have a high school diploma. And they don't have anybody to fall back upon or ask for help. So that's why they fall into many of these, as I mentioned, grim statistics. So it's a very dangerous time, if you will, when youth age out of the foster care system. That's why it's so important that as foster parents, we spend a lot of time training them and helping them with those skills before they leave the system. How to change a flat tire, how to fill out a job application, how to apply to fill out a bank account and learn how money skills, how to learn cooking skills and living skills, etc. So they are prepared and they are equipped when they do leave the foster care system.
I think a little bit of this comes down to maybe the design or the infrastructure of the system itself, because when you speak of the things that you prepare the children for, you speak as a parent. Most parents do this. I mean, when you look at kids coming out of their parents' home, they have these skills. Why is it that they have these skills and the kids coming out of foster care don't? And it could be that, the way the system is designed, again, going back to the whole nuclear family thing, people don't see these children as the same way they see their own children, perhaps. And so maybe some of these educational things that you come up with and the care that you provide and the compassion and the love that you provide is not provided everywhere or continuously. And so it fails to allow these children to blossom from when they leave the system. And I've heard these statistics few times before, and the incarceration rate is ridiculous. It's almost, from foster home to jail, essentially, at that rate. Now, compassion fatigue is a real concern for foster parents and caregivers. You've gone through, 60 kids.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how you wake up the next morning and accept another child, because a lot of foster kid parents don't. A lot of foster kid parents, they just stop. So how did you do that? And how are you so
they do
vibrant and comfortable? And, I'm sitting here looking at you and you're not drained. You're full of energy and you're full of hope. And so how do you do that? I think that's a secret all parents want to know.
Well, first of all, I think it's important to recognize that term, compassion fatigue. I love that term. Fatigue, exhaustion from compassion, from caring, exhaustion from caring. And many caregivers experience it as they're caring for these children in their home with tremendous anxiety, trauma, etc. And it's also known as secondary traumatic stress. And sure, I have been there. There have been times where I have been completely worn down, completely exhausted, burned out, if you will, suffering from compassion fatigue. But there's ways to combat it, if you will. Self-care is critical. It is critical. If you can't care for yourself, you can't care for those in need. I'll say it again. If you can't care for yourself, you can't care for those in crisis, those who need you most. So it's important that I practice self-care. And there are times when I'm better at it than other times. My wife and I are very much a partnership when it comes to all things, especially raising and parenting children, our own children and the children who come to live with us from foster care. And there may be times where we might rely upon each other a little extra. For me, I do practice a lot of things. I spend time. I love to garden. For me, it's very therapeutical. It's very healing. In fact, I was out there doing it earlier today. I can find a lot of peace, and all of my anxieties and worries about the children can just go away, if you will. I spend a lot of time, I spend each morning in devotion or scripture, prayer. There are other practices of self-care, but self-care is very important for those who are experiencing compassion fatigue. And I do wake up every morning thinking, how can I help these children today? Not just my own children, but the foster care system in general, because it's been, whatever reason it might be, I am just driven. I feel that this is my calling to help. Yeah, very driven. Because if I don't, then who will? I can rest, I can sleep when I die, if you will. But if I don't help these children,
I actually say that too.
Unfortunately, there's not many who are going to pick up the mantle and say, well, I'll help,
Mm-hmm.
And it's needed more than ever before, because we have this mental health crisis. We have human trafficking has blown up over the last 4 years with the open border in the United States. We had the last previous presidential administration, we have 800,000 children missing. Most of them are victims of human trafficking. So the issue for me is more relevant than ever before.
Yes. And people, for the global audience, the American audience is maybe not so much, but somewhat aware of these numbers. And it's mind-boggling when you hear about, the trafficking numbers in the U.S. And sometimes I read and I have to do a double take and make sure, did I see the U.S. with these statistics? It's insane. And then I speak with people, in say India or Egypt or other countries in Africa and Asia or South America, Colombia, and there's an orphanage that we were part of in Colombia, and I speak with the founder there, and I tell her the numbers sometimes, and she says, per capita, those numbers are scary. And to think the United States, you would think you're talking about, Venezuela or some neighboring country, but the United States. And I say, yes, I was so shocked too when I first delved into that space and realized these things. But then it's real. It's not some, fake news or something. It is actually, real statistics. It's insane. And it's really scary.
It is. And it's something. It's something that our legislators didn't want to address for whatever reason it is, and I have my suspicions. It's something that many in our nation don't want to talk about because it makes us feel uncomfortable. I call human trafficking America's ugly secret. It happens in every single community, but it makes people feel uncomfortable to talk about it, so we don't address it. We sweep it under the carpet. And our legislators, well, during the previous administration between 2021 and 2024, the open border at the millions of people flooded in, and a lot of that was human trafficking and drug trafficking. Human trafficking is the number one global business. And the previous administration just didn't address it to what I think that they should have. And we see the results.
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm quiet there for a second because I just think of, it's a lot of kids, when you think of the amount of children that you're speaking about, it's a ridiculous, we're not talking a stadium full of kids. We're talking a city full of kids at these numbers, and to think that this happens annually, and to think that we have all of this tech and all of this power and all of this funding even and to address this, and yet somehow you say we sweep it under the rug. But why? I really don't understand the why.
Well,
that's where.
Well, for the general society, again, for general society, it makes them feel uncomfortable. So they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to admit it might be happening in their own community, in their own neighborhood, maybe even their own family. For the politicians, there is another reason behind that, and one I'm just not going to go into.
That's fair.
But for nefarious reasons. Nefarious reasons.
Fair enough. Now, speaking of technology and social media, that has changed the landscape for children in foster care as well.
Oh,
It's made it so dangerous, so dangerous. So what do you do in your
yes.
household in terms of rules, regulations, or support to, and I really want this as help for foster parents and parents, because if you have kids in your home and you have no clue about what to do regarding the challenges of social media, it's a moral crime that you're committing against your children. So, as a person with the expertise,
Yes.
please
Amen.
give us a little bit of that. Tell us what you do and how you can make it safer for the kids.
Well, the most vulnerable children go online and go on this for one reason, this phone, to find love, to find acceptance. And the sexual predators out there recognize these vulnerable children, lure them in with false promises, lure them with the false hopes, and they run away to human trafficking. In our house, we don't even begin the discussion of having a cell phone until you're in at least ninth grade in high school. And that doesn't mean you're going to get it, but that means we'll begin to have that discussion. Because the frontal cortex does not develop until someone is at least 25 years of age. Some are now suggesting it's 30 because of dumbing down of social media, if you will. So there's no way a young child can navigate the many, many dangers that are on social media and online technology, particularly those who are reaching out to them saying, hey, I'll be your friend, but it's really a very dangerous person. So they can't navigate that. So they shouldn't have access to it. Sadly, many, many do. So, and again, in our house, we don't even begin the discussion until ninth grade. And then if we believe that you're ready for it, we heavily monitor it. We limit the hours of use that they can have on it. In our house, a child places their cell phone in the kitchen at nighttime or in our bedroom at nighttime to charge. Because they don't need to have in their bedroom at all. No way, particularly at nighttime. And my wife and I will go through the texts. And people say, well, you're invading the child's privacy. Absolutely not. We're not doing that. We're protecting our child.
Thank you for saying that.
Well, because if we don't know who's reaching out to our child, then who does? So we need to make sure that whoever our child is talking to online, that we know them and that person is safe. We also have the rule that you can't know anybody on social media. You can't be friends with somebody on social media unless you actually know them in person. There's no reason why a child should have 10,000 friends on social media, because if you take 1% of that as a danger, and that's a very low number, and that's a problem right there. So we also monitor the games they play, the songs they listen to, the videos and movies that they watch and access online. Again, we're not invading their privacy. We're protecting our child. And as I mentioned earlier, we're in a mental health crisis, and much of that comes from this right here. Yet there are many parents who they don't believe it, they don't want to believe it, or they're too busy themselves on their own device to monitor their child and to supervise their child online. So we strongly believe in restrictions, again, to protect the child and help them navigate the many, many dangers that are on there.
And I think it also leads to a more transparent and open and healthier relationship between the parents and the children when there is that openness versus it's my room, it's my phone, you're not allowed, blah, blah, blah. And you create this wall that just becomes, it extends on its own as the child grows until the point where you have no clue about your child. And next thing, you get a phone call that is, extremely depressing, distressing, shocking, tragic. But then, you kind of also supported that happening over the years by allowing this space to grow between yourself and your children. I want to ask you something.
Right. And we, as I mentioned, if I could go on for a minute, though. If I go on for a minute, though, as I mentioned, we also limit the time the children are online because we are going to spend that time with them talking and forming relationships and having fun and teaching them how to cook and going swimming, going for a walk, going on vacation, playing games with them, having that human interaction. Right. Because I don't want my children to be doing this all day long, looking at their phone and not knowing how to have an actual conversation and how to develop a healthy, normal relationship with somebody instead of doing it online. And, a lot of our children struggle with writing skills, social skills, speaking skills, because they're spending so much time online. They don't know how to form a healthy relationship. Well, my children are the opposite. We're getting off that phone and we're spending time with them. We're forming relationships. We're being a family.
Yes, I get all of what you're saying. And I hope people listen to this part. If there's any part of this they're going to listen to, because this is what will save your children. And this is what will create a healthier human in the future. I want to ask you something that, unfortunately, I don't know how it got here, but unfortunately, faith and scripture and belief has become controversial somehow, and this new mindset of people, going science and further and saying, what's faith and all of that. I don't subscribe to that myself. I defend faith. I defend your relationship. When you have that relationship with, let's say, Jesus, for example, you develop something that develops on compassion, develops on an understanding of your community and that love and that faith that it comes with. And you don't have to connect that to politics or, the Vatican or this or that. It's just your relationship, right? As a person raising so many children with so much experience, I mean, you're probably one of the most experienced people at raising children in the world, because how many people have raised 60 kids in their home, and the majority of them with, so much mental health issues coming in. I mean, they're coming in with baggages and baggages of trauma. And we're not talking, right, you're a king of a small island nation, and you happen to have 60 children and they're all roaming in luxury and safety and security and there's no worries. That's a very different upbringing, right, for the kids. But you're raising, what we can learn from you essentially should be the roadmap to how to make the world a better place, considering all the crisis that we're going through. So this question, really, I've been holding it this whole time. And ever since you came on our radar, this was the real question I wanted to really ask is, how much does scripture and faith really play a role in it raising these kids and kind of handing them to the world with the faith that it's going to be better?
It is the forefront. It really is. I couldn't do it. I could not do it without my faith, because there are times when I say, I'm tired, I'm worn out, I'm exhausted, I'm angry with the system, I'm grieving over a child leaving my home, I'm grieving over the loss of a child, I'm angry at the system, whatever it might be. And there are times that I really, really struggle. I've had as many as 11 kids in my house at the same time. And that's exhausting. Absolutely exhausting. And I've got to make sure that my own relationship with my wife is healthy, and that my work is going well, and that my own children are doing well. So all these things, and if I don't have faith, I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm going to drop it. I firmly believe that all of us, you, I, everyone, is in one of three stages in life. We're either going into a storm, we're in the storm itself, or we're coming out of the storm. And our anchor, for me, is my faith. So if I don't have that anchor, I'm going to sink. I'm going to sink.
Or worse, you're going to be in that storm for the rest of your life, because there's no way out without faith. That's the way I see it. And, with just expanding on that, one of the things I appreciate happening in the United States specifically right now with all the commotion and chaos and stuff is I'm seeing a revival of faith with the current administration and everything. I'm seeing a revival, and I'm seeing a restoration of faith, and I'm seeing a movement away from the older system where it was lost. I mean, I spoke with people, and I really believe. I'm not shy to say I believe, and I have faith. And when I speak with people, and they would say, "Oh, keep that to yourself," or something like that, and it would be in public. It would be, whether it was a reporter, whether it was a podcast, or something like that, and you couldn't even say anything about it. You had to just be like, "Okay, fine." But today, I feel like it's reviving, and it's healing people, and it's making for a lot more healthier communities. And when I speak with people across the US, people I'm friends with, or even on the show or other places, I'm starting to see that again. People are mentioning those words, and people are starting to find compassion again in their communities. They're connecting. It's really working. And I feel it really helps the children too.
I agree 100%. I think we are seeing a revival, and it's very encouraging. It's very encouraging. I think of my own children, particularly my older children, and they're telling me the same thing. They're seeing it within their own circles as well. In our house, we have this rule. Doesn't matter what you're doing Saturday night. Doesn't matter how late you are out Saturday night, Sunday morning. We're going to go together as a family to church.
Amen to that.
Family,
yes,
to pray together. That's something that unites their family. And sadly, many families don't have that uniting fact. They don't have that thing in common. They let their children do whatever and explore whatever. Well, as a result, they drift away, they drift apart, or they become immersed in a lot of issues that might be too late to recognize. So that is at the core of our family.
I love that. And it's also the core of any healthy community. Because when you have a community that gathers, you have a community that know each other, that can, be there for each other and many other ways. So I also really believe in that, and I'm glad that's happening and it's helping the children. Now, there are people who want to help, who may not be able.
When it comes to foster care,
right?
When it comes to foster care, I don't believe the government can do it by itself. I don't believe the government can do it by itself because they failed. They failed. I believe the church's next mission field is the foster care system. I can go to Nicaragua and Honduras and Mexico and do those things, and I've done it. My children have done it. It's wonderful. But there's a mission field within each mile, I believe, of every church in our nation, because there's a child in crisis in every community. There's a child being abused, neglected, abandoned, whatever it might be. So today's people of faith, whether it is Christian, Judaism, or whatever it might be, whatever faith it is, they have the opportunity to help children and families right where they live. So what I'm seeing is a lot of churches and faith-based organizations stepping up and saying, we will help. We will help.
And you know what? To some people, it's like they don't get it, but I tell them this is part of the essence of these organizations. I mean, part of the essence of faith is to help children and support and be there for whoever needs, right? And that was the essence of building a church or a synagogue or a temple or a mosque or anything that maybe it was a place where you gathered and you supported each other, and it was a place where that community can feel safe in a sense, right? I mean, you go back hundreds of years and you could go into a church and claim asylum. That was the purpose of these missions. And so when the government comes in today and kind of pulls the rug from under the oldest, most stable form of support, it also causes the problems we see today. So I do want to see a revival of that. I do want to see support in that way. And now, what is your advice to people who may not be able to foster but want to support in any way they can? I mean, for example, one way is, hey, donate money to the people who are doing the work, who can do the work, support them that way financially. But what have you seen that has worked communally for people to support? Or how have you received support that has really worked for you?
Well, I couldn't have done it without my own church. My own church has wrapped us, my family and I, around them and helped us in a number of ways. I have a book called The Church in Foster Care. And again, I think the next mission field is the foster care system. And there's so many ways that people can help children in foster care without being foster parents themselves. Mm-hmm. When a child comes in the foster care system, many times they just have the clothes in their back in a black, or all their belongings in a black plastic bag. Well, people can donate brand new clothing or suitcases to child welfare programs. They can donate school supplies. They can donate hygiene items. They can be mentors and tutors for children in foster care system. They can come around foster families and help them with meals. During the holiday season, they can adopt, if you will, a foster care family and help buy presents for these children and gifts for these children. Those are just a few of the many ways that we can all help children in foster care without being foster parents themselves.
Which again, it would be amazing if people did rally around their faith-based communities, because then you get to know people and it just builds in by itself. Like you said, your church helped you tremendously. And I think when people are involved in that way, they know John here has 11 children in his house. So when we go to buy gifts for the 2 kids in our house and the 1 grandchild in our daughter's house, we're also going to buy 4 more gifts and give it to John because we know John, right, in our community. So it's a way that people can be involved. Now, asking that question and bringing in this conversation and taking it to where I think you and I both agree in terms of resolution, that these centers can be really, the way forward for foster care. I also want to ask this question before the comment section fills up with negativity. The church has been implicated in many ways with child abuse, generally.
Right.
How do you balance that? When somebody asks you, but the residential schools in Canada, but 800, kids' bones found in Ireland under, a church, and all these questions. And how do you respond to that? Because people need to hear that, there is a difference here.
That's a great question. And sadly, there is corruption and evil in every single pocket of our society. And money has a lot to do with it. Money and power and corruption often translate towards evil, if you will. Yes, it's true. We know there are bad politicians. There are some bad police officers, some bad firefighters, some bad teachers, or some bad parents, or some bad churches. There's a bad apple in every single barrel. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of those bad apples out of every barrel so it does not contaminate the entire barrel. If you have 100 apples in a barrel and one is bad, it can quickly, and 99 are good, that one bad apple can quickly rot the entire barrel. So we need to get rid of that bad apple and focus on the good ones. Same thing with faith-based organizations. Yes, sadly, there are some bad people, and we need to root them out, and we need to be skeptical. I teach, when I used to be a teacher, and with my own children, I tell them every single day, question everything, do your own research, don't believe everything you read, and make sure that what you're investing in, you have thoroughly researched. So I would say the same thing about those faith-based organizations. You can't lump them all in, that's generalization. That's generalization. I don't believe in generalization. I don't believe in stereotyping. I don't believe in labeling. We don't have any of those in our, if you look at my family, you see a very, very colorful family, but we don't divide them into categories. Oh, this is our black child. This is our brown child. This is our adopted child. This is our father. We don't. We're all members of the same family.
Right.
We're all the same color in our house. When I say the same color, we're all the same color, the God skin. We're just different shades of God's skin. I mean, what color is God's skin? Right. So we're different shades of God's skin. We're all members of the same race, the human race. So we are careful to do all things.
And I also want to add to that, when you are a member of your church or whatever institution, your synagogue or mosque or wherever, your preacher, your priest, you have a relationship that's developed over the years. It's going to be really hard for them to do shady business in the basement when you've been going there for years. And when you know these people and the stories start to happen, right? I mean, you catch on to those. Like you said, you catch the bad apple really quickly that way. But when you're not involved and you're only going to go there on one Wednesday every 6 months to talk about something about foster care, problems are going to arise because you never paid attention. You were never part of the community. To be part of a faith-based community, you really need to show up. You need to be invested and you have to believe. Essentially, you don't just go there for the music. You have to believe. And when you believe, you know who's in your organization. It's just like a sports team. When you're a member of, I don't know, an NBA team, I mean, there's no way you don't know what's happening with your 5 other players who are on playing with you, so you're there day in, day out with them every day. You get to know them in some way. So it's the same thing with faith. When you have a relationship with your church, you know what's going on in that church somewhat. It helps to protect the kids.
You certainly should.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why you need to shed the light of awareness on those who are doing bad things. Because, as I mentioned earlier, America's ugly secret is human trafficking. We ignore it as a society because it makes us feel uncomfortable. Instead, I want to shine the light of awareness on it so we can bring it to the forefront, recognize what's happening, and become stronger advocates for these children. Same thing with all areas of life. If we recognize that something is wrong, we need to shine a light of awareness on it, bring more advocates to fight against it in order to protect that thing, to protect that establishment, to protect the children, protect the people involved in it, whatever it might be.
If you were the most influential person in the US right now, what would be the first action you take towards igniting this national shift to, take this out from under the rug and essentially provide a solution that we can work on? What would that be? What would Dr. John DeGarmo say, here is my advice?
Well, it's not a very popular advice. I'm sure it's not popular. But what I would do is shine the light of truth on these issues and bring them out to the forefront, because so many people are in denial of what's actually happening. Human trafficking, Jeffrey Epstein, P. Diddy, our legislators, our Hollywood stars, our athletes, shed the light of awareness on what's actually happening, not putting these people up on a pedestal, but recognize what might be happening to these people and then address it. Because I mentioned earlier, when you have awareness equals advocacy. We need more advocates for these children. We need more people fighting for these children. We need to stop pretending these issues are not happening all around us. It's probably the first thing I would do. And then I would address the foster care system. Foster care system overwhelmed with children flooding into a system that they can't address it, because today's caseworkers, today's social workers are overworked, overwhelmed, under-resourced, understaffed, undersupported, underpaid. I would address that. Today's foster parents are struggling with compassion fatigue, with lack of resources, with lack of support services. I would address that as well.
I like what you said. I don't think it's unpopular at all. I think it is brewing in the US as well right now, and people are starting to have that awareness to these issues that you're raising, and it may not be spoken of so publicly, but I think behind closed doors, many of us inside and outside the US have an inkling of understanding of why 800,000 kids go missing beyond a simple sex trafficking act. So I think it's not a secret. It's the elephant in the room, which is a very different thing than a secret. With a secret, there could be 100 people in the room and only 2 people know of that secret. But with the elephant, all 100 see the elephant, but they're just not talking about it. And I think right now we're at that stage where one person points to the elephant, everybody's going to say, okay, I see it too. I'm not going to lie. And then you have that social revolution that leads to policy, that leads to change, that leads to driving something forward. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Last question for you, and maybe off topic, but on topic as well. I want to ask you about Up With People, DJing, and wrestling, all of the things that, completely left field from, your academic background and the work you're doing and the authorship and, the nonprofit and everything else. How did that fit into your life, and how did all that kind of make you who you are?
Well, that's a good question. I get that question a lot. I do have an interesting past, if you will. I grew up performing, doing a lot of singing, a lot of performing in front of others, some stage. Up With People was an international performing group. We traveled the globe. That's how I met my wife from Australia. The radio DJ was just something I enjoyed at that time. As a child, I enjoyed the theatrics, if you will, the storytelling, if you will, of professional wrestling. That good versus bad, if you will, good guys and bad guys. And so I did that for a while. That was fun. But, at one point I recognized, hey, I have a different mission here in front of me. And it was the death of my first child that really shifted all of my priorities, if you will.
That was the catalyst.
But, I had fun doing all of that. I really did. I traveled the world. I met a lot of amazing, wonderful people. And I think all of that has been able to bring me a lot of my skills that I have now, because I travel the nation and the United States and the globe right now, speaking at events, telling people stories about my own self, having people laugh, having people cry, all to bring awareness of these issues. Because again, I think if I bring awareness through storytelling, then I'm going to have more advocates. So that stage performing, that radio DJing, that professional wrestling, if you will, I think that all prepared me for speaking to others and trying to engage them and motivate them and inspire them and empower them to go out and help others.
I want to say that was God's way of preparing you for your actual mission.
Yes. Yes.
I would like to see it that way, because that's what it looks like. And now you're using all those tools to really doing a very brave and courageous piece of work you're doing, because like you said, it's very nefarious and it gets dangerous when you get too close to the real truths. And so what you're doing is really noble in that sense. It's very altruistic, to say the least. So, Dr. John DeGarmo, thank you for speaking on Compassiviste Dialogues, and thank you for your unwavering commitment to the well-being of foster children. I'd say your actions serve as a powerful reminder of the impact every individual can have through compassion and dedication. You said, you're committed, you're dedicated to this, and I think that's what people should understand, that it takes a lot of commitment to be able to support in these ways. And, your life's work now challenges everybody who's heard this here or elsewhere, or through your talks, or read your books or TEDx, or wherever it may be that they found you. Once they find you and once they hear what you talk about and what you say in different places, it challenges us to look beyond ourselves and consider how we can contribute to an actively compassionate society, a society rooted in that faith of compassion, whatever your religious faith may be. But in embracing the vulnerable and providing them with stability and hope, which is an essential an essential life need, you exemplify the true essence of being a compassivist, and why I started what I'm doing. It's really to create a world through people like yourself, through advocates like yourself, to bring that collective together and say, let's amplify them. Let's bring the support that they require. Let's help how we can, because these are the gems in our societies. Like, I don't know of another person who's raised 60 kids. There's value to that, aside from, pat on the back and the good work you've done and all that stuff. There's actual data value in that, addressing all of those issues. Most psychologists haven't had 60 kids through their offices. Never mind live with them for years and years. So, I appreciate all of that. And I really want to encapsulate all of what's in your mind and heart and kind of be able to present it to the world and say, this is what we need to pay attention to. Because this man, he knows what he's talking about. He's been through it 60 times. Listen to him, right? So thank you for all you do. And to our audience, subscribe to Compassiviste Dialogues.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, you don't need to thank me. All I'm doing is is trying to get people to see people like you and understand that 2 houses down from them or across the country from them, there are people like this making the real difference, making that positive change. And if you're ever looking to do something good, it's not too far. There are, Dr. Johns here and there, and we need to support them, and we need to stand with them, and we need to, be a part of what you do. And that's the only way we're going to get better. We're not going to get better by competing. I mean, if someone listens to this and says, I'm going to raise 61 foster kids and beat them, that's not going to help. That's not going to help. But coming together as a community and finding a solution, that's where the help is. So we're going to put all the links to Dr. John DeGarmo, the Foster Care Institute, and Compassiviste below here. Make sure you go and check him out. Make sure you reach out, support, be present in what he's doing, and let's try to revive this in a political climate and a state that we can right now. And we have that leg up, so to speak, to be able to turn this issue over as the time allows and as the political landscapes allows, as well as everything else, because that's also an important note to make here. We're here to help change the world together. Thank you very much. I'm Ali Horiat.